Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm your isn't pro-violence, but if you don't say safety before I say doorknob, I will punch you host, Cam Harless. And with me as always is your cut her hair and lost all of her superhuman abilities, Jessica Green.
Yeah, it's too damn hot for hippie medicine right now. I'm sorry. I cut my hair and I was feeling great about it, thinking, "Oh, it's so much lighter." And the minute I get on Twitter, the first post is like, "Don't cut your hair. Your hair connects you to the trees," and some other hippie stuff. And I'm like, "Oh no, I lost my psychic connection to the Mother Earth because I cut my hair. What a crime." No, yeah, apparently me and that hippie follow each other. So I hope I didn't offend her. It's too damn hot for you right now.
Yeah, I mean, what I found since I shaved my head was that I get a lot colder and just so much sweatier. Like, it's awful. Like, I'm sure it's the same amount, really, but it's just way more obvious. And you're welcome for putting that disgustingness in your head.
All right. I mean, is it because you're wearing more hats?
No, it's just because my hair isn't holding back the sweat.
Oh,
Because
I
it's
guess I
not
hadn't
like,
thought about that.
yeah, and so it's just like dripping.
It's why it's a bad idea to shave your eyebrows or pluck them into oblivion.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, yeah. If you have to
right,
draw them on, it's going to be wiped off by the waterfall you've created.
right. I resisted that trend in my girlhood to pluck the dickens out of my eyebrows, and so now I still have them, and I'm very glad of that. But
very, very good. But we have a show to do. So let me just go ahead and start by telling you this show is 100% brought to you by fans and patrons. So hit like, subscribe on this YouTube video, and share the show with your friends. We have all sorts of topics we've covered. So share them with anyone who might gain something from them. Also, if you'd like to help us out in the most direct way possible, you can join our Patreon. There we'll have occasional early episodes. We've been known to do Zoom hangouts and play games, and I'll be thankful, and Jessica will be thankful, and who doesn't want us to be thankful? Is
gratitude is
my
nice.
question. But also you could grab a shirt or a mug over at wearethemadones.com/store. That way you could carry around my little silly designs on your chest throughout the city. But let's get to the main event. Joining us tonight is a based Stoic. She's been known as a podcaster, a network engineer, and a slapper of the bass. She's a student of the Stoics and an incredibly reasoned individual with a thirst for knowledge and a sharp tongue. My very good friend, Kim Schjang.
Wow,
What's
I
shaking?
liked that intro.
I do try.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on again.
Absolutely. It's always nice to have, so we schedule a lot of shows based on topic or someone's interesting story. So that means a lot of times we're talking to someone who we've never spoken to before. Like we haven't spoken to them except for the 5 minutes before we actually went live. And so it's really nice to have someone that I've known. We've known each other for 6 years now?
Yeah, somewhere around there, yeah.
I mean, it's nice to have someone that I know that I can just talk crap to, and she knows exactly what I'm doing. You're not going to be surprised by my sense of humor.
That's basically like you guys went to high school together.
Yeah. Internet years, totally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Been through a lot of trolling campaigns and pissing off libertarian influencers together. You know how it goes.
Stupidly working on a campaign to run for office. Nice graphics you made for me, though.
Thanks. That was really when I was starting to dip my toe into doing some stuff. And I got to tell you, I've gotten better.
Yeah. I mean, it was still good then, but you've gotten much better.
Yeah, I made since we're actually, this is our last Wednesday night show. Starting next week, starting in August, we are moving to Thursdays. And so one of the things we talked about was creating a new intro and outro and kind of looking at it as a new season since there's this big change. It's something that we've done with every big change. When we moved down from 10 to 8:30, when we all of that. So this is going to be our fourth not logo change, but theme
like
on the logo
thematic,
chain.
thematic change.
So I created both the intro and the new outro today, and if you watch next week, you'll get to see it, and I'll send it to you, Kim, in advance so that you can tell me how bad it is and what I need to change. I just added some stuff to it since you last saw it, Jessica. I made it a little more fun. But last time we talked to you, we spoke a lot about tragedy and Stoicism and how that helped you through your mother's passing. How have you been doing since then? Because that, I've had conversations with my brother about our dad who passed away, 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, and it still hurts. So has Stoicism continued to help you? And also, should I spell Stoic with a little s or a big S?
Oh, we'll definitely get to that. Oh, okay. So it's definitely helped because after my mom passed, we had 7 other people die within the span of 4 months after that. So it was just our family was like we were at funerals all the time. So
Wow.
it was definitely a lot of work on myself and just remembering, everybody's going to die. It just sucks. I mean, could we just have a little space in between each? I can only have so much time off to go and see you people in your casket or whatever. And, me and my dark humor. But so things I've been, it's funny to say now that I'm happier than I've ever been after saying a statement like 8 people in my family died.
Right.
But a different thing was kind of spurred on when one of my mom's best friends told me a few months after my mom passed. And she said she was ready to go. Of course, when you're suffering from an illness, you're ready to go at some point because it hurts too much. She's like, she told her, I just don't want Kim to fall apart. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, no, that does not happen. I'm not doing this falling apart thing. And so, of course, I allowed myself to spend some time grieving, just like laid in bed, eating some like Cheetos and stuff and crying and, all that good stuff that you just have to, even as a Stoic, you have to allow that grief to come through because, people think, okay, if you just block out that grief, that's the Stoic thing to do. And that's what we'll get into the lowercase s Stoic and uppercase. So a lot of people have misconceptions, even in some Stoic groups when people join them to try to learn about Stoicism. And it may seem like it makes no difference. The word looks exactly the same. It's almost similar to back when we were, stupid enough to be in the Libertarian Party or support the Libertarian Party. And then you stepped out of the party and you wanted to differentiate yourself by saying, I'm not big L libertarian, that I would do something as dumb as politics. I'm little L. I just like the philosophy.
Right.
So it's kind of that distinction. The lowercase s is the misconception that people get. And that's why I have to explain, because as soon as I say Stoic, they're thinking, oh, somebody who doesn't deal with their emotions. And I can just end a date right there. If you tell a woman, I can't, I'm a Stoic, you're like, oh, she doesn't have any emotion. This is not going to work. That kind of lowercase stuff like S is the misconception we get. It's not about denying your emotions. And it's more of I guess that might have been born out of the fact that people misunderstood Stoicism, where Stoicism with the uppercase is, of course, the philosophy itself, the philosophy of basically just focusing on what you control. And your emotions aren't to be denied or ignored. They're to be used for, okay, why did I respond to this situation the way I did? And not to give yourself over to that emotion, but just to go, okay, clearly I feel a certain way about this. Let me sit down logically and figure out why and come to a solution. Or maybe this is not important at all. And I got angry because somebody said something and I feel like they might've been right about their, what they said about me. And I got offended because they're right. Well, maybe it doesn't matter at all. So who gives a crap what they said?
One of the things that really struck me the last time we had a conversation about this is when you talked about assenting to emotions. It kind of is alleviating to know that like your emotions kind of come to you whether you want them to or not. So there's not some sort of like weakness on your part for the fact that this like thought has crossed your mind. Your level of control starts at whether you assent to the idea or not. And I found that really impactful in my own life since then, sort of like applying that to things, because I had always taken on a fair amount of guilt for feeling one way or another about a thing. And I realized, okay, like that part, that's not where my control has begun. I don't control that level, but the next step after that, that's when I can seize control of the situation. And I found that really helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad that is. I hope it's helped a lot of people, because it's going to help every single day of your life if you can think of things that way. Because I think a lot of the reason we feel so crazy and depressed and sad most of the time is because we see a lot of stuff around us that we can't control. We see the world going crazy. Things happen in our lives where bills pile up. There's an emergency here, and there's just certain things that you can't control. But there could be some chaos going around you. Everything's on fire, and you're thinking, you know what I can control? Not sitting in this fire right now. I'm just going to go somewhere. Or there's always something you can do to at least what you can control that might make you feel better, because feeling out of control makes you just feel crazy inside.
Right.
Yeah, when I get sad, I stop being sad and I'm just awesome instead. I just decide to be awesome instead. So yeah. So I guess I'm the Stoic.
Well done.
Oh, right on. Always remember how awesome you are.
Tips for the youth.
The youths.
Just,
I didn't.
Just stop.
I knew last time we talked, I feel like your mom had passed and then one more person had. So it just went off the rails even after we talked. I thought that was bad enough.
Oh yeah.
But I can't even imagine. Yeah, I don't think anyone's died around me.
Okay, don't curse that, man. I'm trying to stay alive for a little longer, man. Don't curse me.
The evil eye.
I'm just trying to think. Did anyone like that I know? No, I don't think so. But I have been thinking about death more, which is kind of hilarious because most people don't want to think about death and don't think about death. And we talked about Memento Mori a little bit, and then 3 weeks ago, we spoke with Justin Marler, who was in the metal band Sleep. And then right after they recorded their first album, he left the band and he went to an Orthodox monastery and became a monk for like 7 or 8 years. And he had a zine that was called Death to the World. He wrote a book called Youth of the Apocalypse. And it seems like he's always wearing a hat that says Memento Mori on it. And so when we talked to him, and when I found out about him, I thought about you almost the whole time, because I was like, Kim, but not about the death thing, about the Memento Mori thing. Horrible thing to say otherwise. When I think of death, I think of you, Kim.
Oh, great. I don't know if that's the worst thing or not that somebody has thought about when thinking of me. I'm not quite sure.
But we have had a lot of discussions about death, and I want to not in this episode, but in the future, unless you want to talk about death more, but in the future, I do want to talk about death more, because we had an episode where we talked to Kate. What was her last name? Kate.
Oh, the memorial. She did memorials. I can't remember her last name for the life of me. The British girl, though.
Yes, we had a lovely British girl on who we talked about kind of the cultural aspect of death. And then we also spoke to an embalmer not that long ago. And we kind of talked about like the after you're dead, what happens to your body, what do they do, stuff like that. There's one show that I want to do that's really hard to do and really hard to find someone to do it with, but I may have found a way to do that, which is to talk to someone who has a life-limiting illness and is terminal, is going to die, and has had to in this life prepare for that. Because I feel like there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of things that we don't know that go through people with that situation. And I would love to kind of peel back that understanding and say, what have you figured out? I'm sure you had some really interesting conversations with your mom before she passed. And it's like, we don't hear much from people who are dying. We don't hear much about death. And I still want to do one with an actual, what's it called? A coroner or who actually
medical examiner.
The medical examiner stuff. I still want to do that. Mortician. I want to have more conversations about this, because it sounds really dark, but it's a fact of life, and it's something we need to think about. We need to think through. And so you have I have a certain perspective because of my father. You have one because of your mother, and now what? 7 or 8 other people, and that's just wild. How many people know what that feels like to that extent? I feel like it's a lot less than we would realize.
Yeah. What's interesting is this morning when I was walking to work, I was listening to, of course, true crime podcast, and I believe it was the More podcast where somebody just said they missed me. Anyway, but so she was talking about, it was the second episode of their Jack the Ripper series that they were doing, and one of them is does autopsies, and they were trying to talk about, some people would say that it was somebody who does leather work that was murdering these women because of the dissection. And she was just saying no. And she brought this perspective. She's like, this dude was doing this in 15 minutes. He was attacking these women, basically like taking out their insides all the way to their entire reproductive system, taking out the fallopian tubes and everything. And she's like, you don't know how hard that is to do that well. So it couldn't have been somebody who, was just doing leather work, or they have to be really good at it. She's like, she's been called in for to do an autopsy really fast because toxicology and all of that, and so she would have to take everything out, and she's like, it takes some time to get through all of that and pull it all out. So I just thought that was a fascinating perspective to hear that finally from somebody saying, I literally do this for a living, and you got to be an expert to do it that quickly and not be caught.
Right.
Not to mention that I used to work at a leather store and did a lot of leather work, and I couldn't tell you where I could find the fallopian tubes. So it's like, I mean, I know where they are, sort of, but if I'm thumbing my way through a carcass, I don't know what I'm looking for. So I don't think it was a leather worker. But here, I want to talk more about what you're doing now and bass and all of that. But before that, I just have a simple question. What do you think about the rumor that Jack the Ripper was actually H.H. Holmes?
That would be really fascinating. I've heard it before, and I haven't gotten too deep into it. I've looked at some stuff and I've heard some podcasts, but I don't know if that would be specifically his style to go out in the night to do that sort of thing. This man seemed like he preferred the kind of torture that, he can do for long periods of time. And that's not to say that he couldn't have had periods of time where he was just straight up murdering people. And that was the beginning, because unfortunately, most of these serial killers and murderers have a beginning that might've been different and much more sloppy. And then they kind of built up to something else. But I'm kind of up in the air on if that makes any sense to me. I'd have to look more into, but at this point I'm thinking,
I want it to be true. Because how cool would it be that we found out who Jack the Ripper was, and it was Herman Mudgett, H.H. Holmes, the guy who owned the Death Hotel during the World Fair and had the hotel specifically made so that he could murder people in it. And that's what's that story's so crazy. Not just because of that, but when he was building it, he had these specific plans, and he didn't want anyone to know the full scope of this hotel that he was creating to murder people in. And so he would have contractors and people come in and build up to a certain point, and then either he would fire them or kill them. I'm not sure which it was. And then he would hire someone else so that no one ever knew about all of his secret passages, about all of these different areas. And so, yes, that was a fun way for me to explain to Jessica who H.H. Holmes is without making it too obvious. But if he happened to be Jack the Ripper, I just think that would be really cool.
Yeah. I also don't know if that well, his name, number one, is embarrassing, but at the same time, I don't know if he had the precise surgical skill to sort of do that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think he was probably a doctor.
Yeah. I'd have to look at that. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised, but man, there's a season of American Horror Story where they kind of played with that idea. And even that was frightening, of just a whole hotel was literally just, there's a scene of where they have a woman and he's just kind of piling the bricks on, just kind of while she's sitting there hanging, and just watching him just like kind of basically bury her behind a wall. And I don't know if that's what H.H. Holmes did, but that would be really frightening to just watch somebody just slowly putting the bricks over you, and you're just going to be stuck there behind this like wall and die.
So we're going to talk about,
scary.
I'm going to talk about another murderer now, because this is where we are in this conversation. I'm happy to be here. Israel Keyes. Do you remember Israel Keyes? What a horrifying individual. How many people did he kill?
I can't remember how, but he was pretty prolific, but that stuff was scary to me, that this man had straight up murder kits buried in different places. So he would just be going and traveling. Oh, here's my murder kit. Let me just unbury it and go murder some girl. And then, you know, that's frightening.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what's so crazy is this dude went around the country. Did he fly? I can't remember if he flew himself, but he had gone into the woods in different places and hidden murder kits, and he knew where every single one of them was. And he would get to town, he would find someone, and that's why he was so successful for so long, was because he had no rhyme or reason to his like his preference in people. And so he would just find someone he could kill, and he would find his kill kit and do that, and then I guess bury the body and move on. But you know, you have to wonder with him how many kill kits are still out there, and we just don't know where they are.
This guy is relatively recent. He's in our age group.
He's in our age group?
Yeah. He was born in 1978.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the weirdest thing about, I get tired of giving serial killers really cool names. I don't think we need to be doing that kind of nonsense.
But
But
so fun.
the fact that they call him the dating game killer, because he literally was on the dating game.
Oh, that was Keyes?
Yeah.
Wasn't someone else on the dating game as well?
Here, go for the Google machine.
Well, that's Rodney Alcala.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did get them mixed up. Sorry about that. They all start to blend in together because I listen to way too much true crime now.
But how funny is it that both of us happened upon this genre, and we can just talk about killers all day long if we wanted to. Before we did this show, we talked about doing a true crime show together. I think that could be fun. But what's the other one that's there was this other guy that was like a huge nerd, and he was trying to make a movie and was killing people or something.
Oh, I forgot that guy's name. There was, I remember, I know exactly what you're talking about. There was a podcast I was going for a while that was just all about people who tried to emulate like movies or TV shows like Breaking Bad, Dexter, and all these sorts of things. And I remember them doing a segment on him, and that was just a really weird story.
Yeah. But no, I think if you're looking at the most okay, so we'll move on to the other stuff, I promise everybody who's listening. But if you were to pick a serial killer who you are most disturbed by based on looks alone, who would it be?
Oh man, that's a hard one. I'd say Eileen Wuornos, because man, she looked like a fright, that woman there. But and I think what was scary to me the most about her is because when people talk about serial killers, you know, they're always thinking about some dude, but this woman was out here shooting up people and all sorts, and it was just a very hateful, crazy human with some really messed up teeth.
Yeah. Well, for me, there is another person with messed up teeth, but Richard Ramirez is such a horrifying person to look at. Like,
especially, I heard that he was stanky as hell too.
I'm sure.
He looks
stanky.
Have
you seen his teeth? Have you seen his teeth? You're not getting fresh men out of that mouth. But yeah, sorry. I just every now and then I have to talk about murder because it's cool.
Just like talk about murder.
I also watched. Someone sent a video over to me in a group chat today, and it was a guy kicking away a grenade too late. And so, I mean, you lose, you don't make it through that. But then I just scrolled down the Twitter account that he sent to me, and I saw so many people die today. Like, what? But I think it's interesting and good to not to look at these things. Like, I don't search out actually death. I find the psyche of humans and the way they think and their psychology very fascinating. So that's why true crime is so interesting to me, because I can't understand these people. So it's interesting to kind of suss that out and try to figure it out. But I think I don't go look at dead bodies, but there is something about noting how fragile we actually are that's incredible. Like, it's something that when you I mean, you can just see one picture or one video or whatever, and from then on you realize how fragile and how easy it would be for you to leave this planet. And all I'm saying is, don't go watch those videos.
Oh no, I've made the mistake of either watching a video or I saw a picture of a just a body where they cut up everything, and it was just fresh, and I was just looking at it like, well, that's frightening. And I was like, I'm not going to look at any of this anymore. That's wow.
Do you remember that video that went around a couple weeks ago as well, Jessica, with the Australians that were like near a club or something, and the guy pulled out the knife? Like,
yeah, he stabbed the guy in the neck.
That dude went from not knowing what was going on to dead within like 30 seconds.
I think you have 10 to 20 seconds after you have arterial spray, which is when it's like spurting, before you lose consciousness. So he probably was like, oh shit, I'm bleeding. And then his next thought was, boy, I feel lightheaded. And then that was it, lights out. I mean, he didn't know what was happening to him.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, that as weird as it sounds, it's better. What is that one guy? I cannot stand him. It was the gay guy who, in the documentary "Don't F with Cats."
Luca Magnotta.
Yes, that's psycho. Like, there's that video of him just like where he not only suffocates his cats. I think he has that one where he's like basically getting it on with this dude, and then just kills this guy. He's just like sawing him apart and all sorts. I'm like, that is what I'm with you with the what just makes anybody think this is okay. That's what fascinates me. I'm like, what goes on in that kind of brain that makes people think this is okay, and they're fine with it and they love it, and it's really weird to me.
Luca Magnotta was so interesting because he was so uninteresting. Like, his whole thing was he was trying to be famous. He wanted to be the best looking. He wanted to be a model and an actor, and he was very weird looking, in my opinion. And he made all kinds of fake photoshops of him in different places. He made fake websites that talked about how great he was. And then it just didn't work out, and it didn't work out. And his first things that got people interested in him was when he put the cats in. It was like it was like in the, he sucked the air with a vacuum out of it. And then he fed one to a large python, and like, this is not a good person, and he's putting this out there. And the reason people figured out who he was and figured out that he was the guy who killed the Chinese immigrant in Canada who was going to school there was because they were able to take these little tiny clues from his videos, and they were able to put it all together because they were mad about the cats. I don't know if they cared so much about the person as they did the cats, but they cared about the cats.
Which is a sad story, because he basically mailed that poor student's body parts somewhere, and it's the cats that really upset them. Wow.
Here's one thing I want you to notice. Look how disturbed Jessica is right now.
I don't like hearing about animals or kids getting hurt. It really upsets.
Yeah. That was what, and of course, I think one of the worst things that can happen when you listen to true crime is they'll play like a snippet of sound, and then your brain and its morbid curiosity says, "Oh, I have to look at this. I have to see what this is." Never listen to that voice.
No.
You don't want to see a dude literally eating an ass. You don't want to see that.
Yeah, you don't want to see anybody eating ass.
Okay, Jessica, I'm going to let you change the subject. What would you like to talk about now?
I've kind of gone down a road here.
What are you looking into Luca Magnotta?
No, I will specifically not look into Luca Magnotta.
Please don't.
That's not something. Yeah, I don't want to know about that. I don't want to hear about that. I didn't watch the Don't Fuck with Cats documentary just because I knew the content was not something I wanted to hear about. Me hearing about it just now was more than I'd managed to not get exposed up until that moment.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
He's a really
Traumatized
bad person, and it's wild. I wonder how many people are out there that do these sorts of things simply because they weren't able to gain the acclaim that they wanted to in their regular life.
Yeah.
Like, because that's kind of what this guy did. He moved from identity to identity, to skill set until he got to the point where he wanted to be famous for murder. Like, and the fact is, he lives in Canada, so that means he probably will get out of prison someday. The guy in Canada who attacked the man on the bus, you know that story. I won't go into detail to hurt Jessica anymore, but you know that story. I think he got out like about 12 years into it, and he's just living his life now.
Yeah, that's always the hard thing. Would they do it again? Because of course it seems like he did this in some sort of weird fueled rage that I don't know of any other way you could do what he did. So there's, he might not do it again. I'm like, anybody who just jumps on public transportation and does what he did, I'm going to be a little worried about at any point. Like, what if he goes off medication? Like, what is going to happen with there? At least, are we watching this guy? Something? Keep it tabs?
Well,
I don't know.
And that's the thing about it is, like, I won't go into detail because I don't want to hurt Jessica's heart anymore, and we can move on to better subjects. But what he did was not a normal attack.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it was. How do you even finish the job? I don't know. But
it is wild.
Sorry, we got into true crime, and that's a disgusting topic. And anyone who's not used to hearing that, I apologize. We will move on now. Let's talk about your band, because you're in a band now, Kim.
Yes.
I want to hear about it. What are you doing?
All right. Well, the local scene, anybody who's had to be in local bands, it's a slog to get through. But the good thing about living in Las Vegas is that this is one of those cover band central. Everybody wants a cover band. And people are thinking, why would you be in a cover band? They make money. Because people know when they hire your band, you're not going to play some original crap that they're thinking, oh, I don't like this. You're playing stuff that they know. And even if you don't play it perfectly. So I started, was it October of last year, decided that as somebody who was, has all these instruments behind me, you can kind of see them, and they were just sitting in the corner of my room for years. I had stopped playing music for a long while. I started, of course, in 6th grade as a saxophone player. And then the funny thing was I learned to play guitar in junior high in a mariachi band. So that was very interesting. Shout out to the C and D7 and G7 chords, because that's apparently all you need for these bands. But I had always loved music. And then the only reason I started playing bass was because I played in a church band. Of course, you got to have the church band in your background there. And all of us were sax. I was actually going to get to that point too. Yes, okay. You literally nailed it right there. It's just, we had all of our guitar players. They wanted a youth worship band. All of our guitar players were the sax players too. So we're like, we can't just have all guitar players. So somebody's going to play bass. And they're just looking at me like, you're black, you play bass. And so I was just like, okay, I'll give it a try. So I played bass like a guitarist, and there's nothing wrong with that. It does the trick. You're playing usually the root notes of the chord, and that's fine. You can get around with that. And that's how I did it with band back then. But then recently, I think as I went through all of these family deaths, that I wanted to make sure I didn't waste my life. And I think that is something common for people who experience somebody they love dying, is that your perspective goes, well, I don't want to waste my time. I want to make sure that I'm enjoying the time that I have left. And so I was just looking at all my instruments, and I was like, you know what I do? I listen to the bass a lot in songs. And it's not the most beloved instrument to some people. It's sometimes the most forgettable instrument to people. But for me, I have a playlist just called Favorite Bass Lines. It's how much I love listening to the bass. So I was like, you know what? I want to learn how to play the bass like a bass guitar player. Take it from that perspective instead of guitar player. And it has been the most wonderful, transformative journey that I've ever decided to go on. I've been taking lessons. I take lessons every Sunday, and then I work on stuff all week. And so my bass instructor, who actually is a student who graduated from the Berklee School of Music under John Petitucci, one of the most prominent bass players alive at this point. And he said, you know what will really help your bass playing is if you started playing with a band. Yeah. And he's like, whether it's a cover band or whatever, because to go through a course the way I'm going through, they don't want you to just be playing the bass just for fun, playing some scales. They want you to be able to do improvisation. They want you to be able to do covers. They want you to be able to do ear training, every single aspect of music. And it's been awesome. And so he encouraged me, and I decided, how am I going to find band members? Am I going to post on a board? So I went on Facebook and found there were Las Vegas musician groups. And I was like, hey, bass player here, taking lessons. I've been at it 9 months. Just want to see if there's anything out there. And then I had this influx of people in my inbox. And I found out eventually it's because bass players are really flaky in Las Vegas. So you'll have a bass player and they just will not show up to the next practice. So I'm just thinking, more money for me right there. And I was in a band called Space Trash for a bit.
That's a good name.
Yeah, it's just trying to tell people, hey, I'm in a band called Space Trash. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to play a live show because we kept losing drummers. And eventually I stepped away because I joined the band that I'm in now, Burning Allure, and which the band before that was more of a punk, like 80s, 90s cover band. Now, Burning Allure is more of a like late 90s to 2000s and on, like more of a hard rock metal cover band, which is right up my alley. And that's why I have a 5-string, because some of those songs are played in some really, really drop tuning. So I got a chance to use my 5-string, and we had our first show a couple weeks ago, and the mixture of Stoicism is what helped me on that one, because even though I played at churches, people at churches, we're just there, they're just there to worship. So they're not going to be all like, that band sucked, boo, get off the stage, because they're too busy feeling Jesus at that point. So I had to use Stoicism, because back in the day, this would have freaked me out. I was like, I'm about to get on stage with an instrument. Granted, most people probably wouldn't have heard the mistakes except for the sound guy, because he did say there were a couple jazz notes the band played, and I heard them too, because that guitar player, man, he was all up into them songs, man. A couple of wrong notes, but most of these performers, there will be some wrong notes or delayed starts or all that. So it happens during live performances, but it was the best feeling just being up there, just vibing with other musicians. People are just in the crowd screaming, and they're singing along. There's something to that experience that I think is transformative in a way and good for the confidence. But I definitely had to sit down and use some Stoic skill of imagining what would it be like if I fucked up on that stage and everybody just saw me do it and just heard it. Like I just played a big fat honking note, because there were some times that I was playing by myself with a pick. We did Sober by Tool, and there's just a whole bunch of like strumming, and it's just straight up bass for that song. And I was like, what if, I just had this big old disgusting note and everybody heard that? And so I had to go through all these scenarios. And of course, as I mentioned last time, then the negative visualization helps you get over that kind of fear. Imagine everything going wrong, your whole band messing up and everybody going, what the heck? And then just everything falling apart, because you'll be ready for it. But the good thing is the drummer did mess up a pass, but I work with such great musicians that we recovered without anybody noticing. Like he just kept going, and I'm like, dude, he just missed like half of the verse. And so we just jumped in on that other half that he went to and just kept going. It's the fun of live music, and I think will really challenge your musicianship if you play with people that are better than you and you have those kind of experiences where you can recover and people don't even notice. I mean, they were probably all drunk anyway, so who cares?
Well, it's like part of the reason we're moving to Thursdays is because, I don't know, you saw my whole deal with the Washington Post and Tucker Carlson and all that, right?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Wild. But everyone was calling me a comedian, and I make a lot of jokes and I write a lot of jokes and I do a lot of joke stuff, but I've never called myself that. And so once they put that on me, I was like, I need to actually try this now and not be so afraid. So I don't know if it'll be next month or what. I'm going to work on a tight 5 soon. I'm going to try to figure that out. And so, I have been thinking about what it would be like to just, eat it. Just, not what's it, not what's it called again? What do they say? It's not kill, because killing a room's good. What's the bad thing? Why am I blanking on this
Killing his
term?
room is good. Oh yeah, it's gonna come to me at some random time. We'll just move to some serious
Right.
topic, and I'm just gonna yell it out.
Right. But no, I'm gonna try that. And so I've been thinking, and you know what? I'm going to have that happen. Like, that's how it works. That's how you learn. And it's about, being able to improvise and find what the people think is funny that you're talking to. So it's like, if you tell certain jokes and people start laughing, that's where you head. And you have to, and I'm trying to figure all of this out. I don't know if I would do crowd work or not. I would need to figure that out. But I'm in the same boat, but in a different compartment where we're making jokes and making an ass of ourselves instead of playing bass.
Right on. Well, congratulations on taking that step. I like to see your progress there, man, because it people think comedy is easy. It is not.
No, it's not. But I am, what's her name? The Hawaiian senator or representative. I am Tulsi Gabbard's favorite comedian. So, Ice Princess would like to know if you're familiar with the Toadies.
Oh, what's funny is that the band I'm in now, that one of their songs was in our set, was I forgot the name of it. Oh gosh, it's one of their more famous songs. Like probably the song they were the most famous for, but it's in a really weird time signature. So our show is coming up quickly, so we have to drop that out of our set. But yeah, the Toadies, I'm down with the Toadies, man.
I don't know the Toadies, but should I?
Oh, it's Possum Kingdom. That's the name of the song, Possum Kingdom. I'm pretty sure if you actually listen to that song, you would know it because it would be on the radio. It's I forgot. They've been out for a long time. That song was pretty big on the radio for a bit. I bet you if you just looked it up, Possum Kingdom, back at some point after this, and then you'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah, and she said Possum Kingdom.
Am I wrong again? Because I hit a joint earlier, so I could be totally wrong. So don't trust anything that I'm saying unless it's about Stoicism.
Well, I think a fun thing we could do now would just be a conversation on what we've learned lately, because I know how I am and how I'm always reading stuff and trying to figure stuff out. So I have like things in my head that I'm going to eventually put out into the world. But what have you learned lately? What's something that you've really dug into and have studied ad nauseum, and you feel like you have some feeling on it or some grasp of it now?
I'd say, it is the Toadies, Possum Kingdom. Yeah, so Google says. Anyway, sorry, but so actually, at this point in time, one of the other things I got into that I just did a complete 180 on, and my boss said there was a huge change, because before I really got into Stoicism, I would have my anxious moments, and especially at work, I had that imposter syndrome going on with becoming a network engineer, because it's a lot of work, because we're not just like playing around with switches and routers. We're also having to do the builds for the data closets and everything. So it's mapping those out, figuring that out, doing the wireless designs for an entire college campus. And I had so much imposter syndrome that it would just paralyze me to the point where I was afraid to try new things. And I think one of my coworkers started to notice that, and he started mentoring me. And I'm pretty sure my boss sent him over to be like, I don't know what's going on with her, but she needs some help. And so when I got into Stoicism and after my mom passed, I was like, you know what? I wouldn't be an engineer. They wouldn't have hired me if they didn't think I had some potential. So one of the things that I had to get into was get my CCNA, which is the professional kind of certification you would get as a network engineer. Usually, if they're looking for a certification for a network engineer, CCNA is the main one they're going to go for. CCNP is the next one up, and that's a really good one. But so I started studying that, and I actually took that test and passed it. And That for me, I was like, I can do this. I can do this,
Yeah.
man. And so I took the wireless course, the CWNA, and was so fascinated. The design and the idea behind wireless is crazy. How they manipulate radio frequencies to carry data in it so that you can send pictures of your cat to your grandma in some other country or something like that is amazing, and do it really fast. It's crazy the things that you can do. And seeing, I'm not going to bore the heck out of people with modulation and all that, but these are things that are fascinating to me, and nobody cares. I'm like, oh my gosh, do you not understand how cool fiber is, man? They're like shooting like a light down this tiny little core, down a cable, and it sends pictures and all sorts of data. Like it could send this whole video file, and that's amazing to me. And most people are like, yeah, that's cool. I just know my internet is slow, and can you fix that? I don't give a crap about any of this, but that's one of the things I've been studying. And the other thing that I've been studying in depth that it's taking some time, and I'm still not at the stage where I can speak very well, but Japanese. Japanese is the other thing that I've been
learning. You're learning how to speak Japanese. Okay, I need like, besides konnichiwa, or let me think of what I can say in Japanese, because obviously konnichiwa is on the list. I can say watashi wa ken, and that's it. No, I can say yoku dekimashita. I don't remember what that means though.
It's all good. I was like that. The way Japanese, the way they set up the lessons is I'm still in the polite sounding phase, to the point if you talk this way to Japanese people, they're like, are you talking to the emperor? Why are you being so polite? It's like learning proper English, and you're like, nobody talks like that. Right. I'll say, I'm trying to think of something to that I would say. Probably the kind of stuff I would say is kohi to ocha o no hoga ii desu, or as I prefer tea and coffee, things like that. I haven't learned any cool stuff. I haven't learned how to say dirty words yet. That's going to be my favorite part. It's just finding out all the terrible words that I can say in Japanese. And there's some stuff that I'm still working on the grammar, because the grammar of Japanese is very simple compared to English. But the problem is, if you have learned English grammar, simple stuff seems complicated, because English is the stupidest language I've ever seen, the way it's structured.
But I love it so much, because that's what's great about English is, you have those very structured languages like German, where if they want to describe a feeling, they just kind of make these huge, weird compound words, like they just keep saying it and they say it's one word. Have you ever seen those lists, like 13 German words you need to know? And it's like, this is the longest word ever, because they're just adding words on top of words. But what I love about English is it kind of forces you to have to be poetic at times. And I think that that's a lot of fun, because you can have so much. Like, here's my question. You were in a mariachi band. Is it easier to rhyme in English or in Spanish? Because like, how does rhyme work over there? Do they have as many chances of that as we do?
They probably do, because I mean there are some words I'm pretty sure have similar sounding endings to them. Especially because the way they can conjugate verbs, I wonder if that sounds repetitive, because if you're conjugating verbs and trying to use that as a rhyming scheme, I think every language kind of has that, but it could be different for languages where they're like Legos. Japanese is the same way, where in English you just make an entirely different word, or it sounds slightly different when you're saying something, where in Japanese it's like Legos. It's like, I'll just take this one word and I'll take this ending off and put this one on, but the front of the word is still exactly the same.
Modular.
But yeah, which I think makes more sense. And of course, English is my first language. I wasted my time on an English degree, and I write poetry, and it is fun to make. I won't deny that English can be very poetic. It's just the idea of it, and the fact that they had to bastardize and steal stuff. It's just like it's very difficult. And anybody out there who has learned English as a second language, more power to you. That's got to be the hardest thing.
I just love it though. I love that we that our language is borrowed and patchwork, and we bring the romantic elements, we bring those Germanic elements, which is what makes words like pluralizing octopus a lot of fun, because I forget the exact understanding of,
It's
or
not
why it's this
octopussies.
way. Well, it's like people will
Just
say
kidding.
octopuses, and that is technically correct because it's one of those that came into our language and didn't have its own pluralization within our language, right? So we just add es to it, and that's how English works. But people also like to say octopi, which is incorrect because I believe that's like the Latin, putting a Latin ending on a Greek word, and so that's not right. But if you wanted to say it correctly in Greek, it would be octipodes, would be the plural. And so I love that you get to have these kind of fun and try to figure things out, like mooses, or moose. Like, I love that there are words like fish. Like, this is a pet peeve of mine, and I feel like if you're looking at an aquarium and you see like 4 or 5, 7 different species of fish, you go, look at all the different fishes. But if it's just all one thing, all a bunch of fish, you would say, look at all those fish.
Yep.
And I think that there's a use case for both, but I hate when I hear the word fishes most of the time that I hear it. I'm like, just stop it.
It's like just go with the fishies. They sound really odd, but yeah, okay, I can see that point. I forgot what a comedian had this bit about. And it's like, what is it? If you say ox or oxen, then why don't you say boxen for box?
Right. Yeah. Brian
boxes.
Regan.
Yeah,
A
there
box
it goes.
and a donuts. Yeah, that's what's kind of fun about it, is because I guess oxen came with its own pluralization, and box is just ours.
Yeah.
But boxes.
Where did Jessica get it? We just traumatized the heck out of her.
That may or may not be what happened. But so I have been. What I love about me asking you what you've learned is I think you and me are very similar, but we're also very different, because you've been doing the Stoicism stuff some, but all the stuff you named was like extremely practical stuff. And all of my stuff is like, I'm currently entrenched in learning about ancient cosmology. Who does that help? People who want to know more about the Bible and how Genesis works. But other than that, no one.
Like
Which is
cosmology in what sense?
so, cosmology as in understanding of creation, essentially. So, I can't. I don't have I haven't fully grokked ancient cosmology yet, but it's really interesting to look at Genesis as it compares to the other cultures and religions around it at that time. So, for example, one of the cool things about Genesis, when you're looking at the culture surrounding it, is that it is kind of also a debate against those other cultures. So the book is part polemic, it's part poetry, it's part narrative. What it's not is a science book at all. And so one of the things that I'm really kind of reading now in this book that I'm reading is about how, when we think about so when we read Genesis, we think that these people, when they wrote it, must think like us. We're like 4,000 to 6,000 years separated from them. We live in a completely different context, a completely different understanding. And so when we read the Bible and it talks about creation, seeing as we've gone through these different periods, and we believe in reason and we believe in science, we read these and we read them as if they are descriptions of material creation, insofar as like a science book. And so, excuse me. So when they say something like rakia, which is translated often as the expanse. The understanding in that time period was that it was literally a dome. And they have so when you're reading this, you're seeing all these different understandings that make sense within their world, but it doesn't make sense to us because we have ships that have gone into space and we've seen what the earth looks like. We've seen all of this different stuff. And so it really shows that when God was teaching about creation and how he created the world, he was speaking into their language and their understanding in that time. And that's why when we say nothingness, we bring in this scientific idea of lack, like absolute zero, a concept they didn't have. When they thought of nothingness, they thought of um, turbulent waters. The ocean was nothingness. The desert was nothingness. And so when you start looking at the first two chapters of Genesis, you see this common thread that God is naming things. He is giving them purpose, and he is putting them into use, right? So it's about identity in some way, and it's also about what like purpose. It's about purpose. So what is this for? And if it doesn't do something, it doesn't have a purpose, much like the ocean, which has nothing for us to like. What do we live from on the ocean? It's not water you can drink. What can you eat in the desert? And so you see these two different accounts, which people are like, oh, these disagree. And it's like, no, these are two separate accounts. One is describing the cosmological origin and the other the terrestrial origin. And it's so fascinating to me. Maybe y'all are getting bored. I don't know. But what interests me about it was this one analogy he made. And he said, so if you walked up to someone in our time and you said, how did this house become your home? And like you'll say, oh, well, we wanted to build this house, so we went to an architect. We had him draw up the plans. We went to a general contractor. We did all of these different things and that you talk about the physical building of the home, right? Whereas the question that the people in that time in the ancient Near East was, if you ask them that question, they would say, oh, well, it became a home when we put Kim's bed into her room, when we put the table into the dining room, when we put the TV into the living room. We define these spaces by what they are for and their purpose. And so when you're reading Genesis and you're wanting to get a scientific explanation of the origins of material, what you're getting is a different story completely. I mean, it comes with the understanding that God did in fact create all of this, and that's the point of the story. The point of the story is to say who did it, not exactly how they materialized these things scientifically, right? What he did. Um, and there's a lot of really cool stuff within the Hebrew text that's completely missed by our translations because English isn't perfect, because Greek has words that we can't figure out. Hebrew has words we can't figure out. But it's that this is kind of the world that I've stuck my nose in, which is fascinating because there are a lot of different mythologies and a lot of different pantheons, especially in that region. But if you kind of take a generalized picture of how religion worked in that time and how creation accounts worked, one good example is the Norse mythology, because when the earth was created, it was created by Odin and his brothers after they took down the giant Ymir. So Ymir was a giant, and he exists because it's so fun. So in Norse mythology, there was nothing in a sense, or rather, there was a gap between what would be called the Gununga gap. And in this gap was a horse, not a horse, a cow, and a block of ice, and inside of this block of ice was a giant, and the cow licked at the block of ice until the giant was freed. And then he had some kids, Odin and his two brothers. They killed the giant, and then Odin went about the business of creating Earth. And so the sky was the inside of his skull. Water is his blood. The trees are from his bones, or you have all of these different explanations. And they're all born out of a god having to fight and having to prove himself, and it comes out of violence. And then you look at let's say, who was it? Marduk. So the Babylonian gods, he had to fight, and this is closer in relation to how Genesis talks about it. But he had to fight Tiamat, which was kind of seen as that turbulent water, that uncreation of water, that chaos, but into a dragon form. And then he fought her for dominion. And then you have this little tiny speck of people in this area who have this story about how their God didn't have anyone he had to fight in order to create. He spoke and it was made. He named things and it was made. And so it's like I'm reading through this and I'm just like, oh, I love this book so much more than I did, because I was reading it like someone who expects something that's not there. I was reading it for an understanding that it wasn't intended to be. And so I've just enjoyed the heck out of learning this. But one of the things that I pulled out of this just recently that I realized is, when it comes to the image of God, this is a very fascinating concept. The Babylonians, the Sumerians, all of these people, they had kings, and the kings often saw themselves as gods or the sons of gods, right? And so as these god men, what they would do is they would set up these statues, these idols of themselves that would watch over the place. And people thought this or another god, the god actually lived within this idol. And so these were the images of God. And so the only person who had the image of God was the king and not everyone else. And so Genesis comes in to destroy this thing and say, no, all people have the image of God. And so then you look, you're in Genesis 2, and you've just read about how God created everything in the cosmos. You read about how he did it on the land. And then you have this little portion where Adam, who is created in the image of God, starts doing some work. And the image of God is a job title, among other things. And so your job is to image God onto this earth. And what's the first thing that we see Adam do in the garden is the animals come to him and he names them. Just like God named everything else and gave it purpose, he named it. So literally his first move as a human being was to be the image of God that we were meant to be. And that little thing right there, I love these little things that I can tie together and go, oh, wow. And I just monologued. What do you think?
The reason I asked was because when you said cosmology, it just made me think of the fact I think the last time that I was on, I was going through the Stoic College, the online version of how they used to do like Greek and philosophy schools. You'd go to a place. Well, I was taking the Stoic Essentials school at the time, which was only like about 4 months. And then after that, they have the Marcus Aurelius course, which is a year long. And it goes through what, all of those philosophical systems had a system of ethics, physics, and logic. And so I found Stoic physics really fascinating because, of course, the Stoic God is entirely different than the Christian God, where you're more dependent on the cosmos, because that's literally their idea of the pneuma is incorporated. Pneuma, also something that's familiar, but the way they have it is the Stoic God isn't actually a being of any sort. It's more so the thing that is ordering the universe. But you'll see, of course, even Stoics now, they incorporate Stoicism, but they're Christians, and you'll see them refer to God, or you see Marcus Aurelius refer to God, and some of the, but they would say Zeus or whatever, but they would have a different name for it, but it was all the cosmos and how you're a part of it and it's within you. So that's why I was like, that's a fascinating thing, because I've seen different versions of, how everybody has an origin story. There are a bunch of them, back from the past, especially back then. People needed to find a reason to explain, because it is crazy. It's like humans just appear. Did they just appear? All the stuff just appear? So of course they had to have some sort of explanation. But I did find that fascinating. The thing that I had to do for after that year long, and the best part of the Marcus Aurelius course is that you're not being taught. You're not teaching your mentor because you have a mentor. You have to actually tell him what you studied, and you have to make a curriculum, and you have to give him all the details. And all he does is just, or she, but there are no mentors that are women yet. Mm-hmm. Could be eventually, but it took so much work and so much studying to do. And at the end, I had to compare the Stoic God to the Christian God, and in a way that is purposely not supposed to be flattering to the Christian God, which was an interesting thing to try to do. And so, I pulled it off, it was really, like I said, it was very difficult to do, considering. But it's fascinating seeing how different people explain certain things. And I do find that topic interesting. That book does sound really cool to get into, because I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, and if you pair what I've been learning with some of the other books that I've read about Genesis 6 and Deuteronomy 32, which is the concept of the sons of God, the other cosmic beings, or not cosmic, spiritual beings within his realm, like you start looking at some of these other gods like Odin, like Vishnu, like all of these in a different light, because there's a story in there about how that came to be and what those things are. And so it's like that one's harder for me to talk about clearly because it's so freaking complicated, but absolutely fascinating. One of my favorite things that came out of reading it is in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We translate it as, and the earth was without form and void. Not very poetic at all. And the writer of Genesis, when he wrote this, he did a rhyme in there, which is tohu vavohu, which if you tried to translate it, it's better if you can kind of keep something similar to rhyme, you could use alliteration. But if you said wild and waste, and so like these little pieces, and it's just, I love that. I love finding out these little things that maybe no one else in the world cares about, but that little rhyme scheme that clears up my understanding of what was before. I live for this crap, man.
Nice. I feel it.
But no, I mean, but that's what's so cool, is because once you start, once you read some of the books in this one that I'm talking about, when you see the epic of Exodus and how God manhandled all of their gods, it's like, this is so much more interesting than I thought. I didn't realize that every plague came at one of their gods and tore down their god. Like, it's fascinating, and I will definitely find someone. I'd really like to talk to a guy named John H. Walton or his son about this topic, because I'm having so much fun reading stuff that people call me a nerd for.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, as long as you're happy with it, I mean, people say I could have probably, based my time around, an instrument that's more exciting. But, if you love what you love, man, I will play the same 5 notes over for 10 minutes and love it. Because, gosh, man, I just like feel the bass. It's my soul right there,
Yeah, well, what's cool about the bass as well is, like, you can feel it when you're playing guitar, because I've played both. You can kind of feel the rhythm when you're doing it, but when you're doing the bass, there's so much more feeling going on, because you're directing, like, yes, the drummer's keeping time, but you're directing a lot of stuff, and it's not just the person at the front singing who's doing the work. And I love a good bass line. It's too bad it's hard for some people to even hear it.
Oh yeah, you're like the one thing in the mix, because a lot of people like to mix it so you can feel it, and you make a very good point, and that's one of the things that I started also with, like, attending the online Scott Bass Lessons Academy, and they have some very advanced lessons that are, you don't want to start that without knowing at least the basics of what you're doing, because they say, oh yeah, beginners can do it, and like within like the first few lessons, this dude is off like creating bass lines. I'm like, dude, they haven't even learned the C major scale yet. Like, what are you doing? But there's a point that they always make, is that basses have so much power and control that they have to be careful with it, because you can change the feeling of a song just by the bass line you're playing. And so it's an interesting job and a balance, because I'm listening to the drummer, and it's the most fun when you're actually having to create a bass line, because you're listening to the kick drum first, and you're seeing that beat, how that's going. Go to your snare, go to the cymbals, and you're making your bass line off of that. At the same time, the key of the song. So you've got to know what notes are in that key, because the guitarist, of course, especially the lead guitarist, is sitting over here making the solo, and if you just are all over the place with your bass line, that guitar is not going to know where to go. You're just going to mess up the whole thing. They need you to have that strong backbeat. You got to keep the melody, you got to keep the time, and you have to keep the key, and you have to do it like a machine. And the way a lot of bassists will play, my instructor said when he was in school, he said, John Patitucci just said, what I'm going to have you do as bassist to really drill that home is, I'm going to set a timer for an hour, and you're going to play the same exact bass line that entire hour, and see if you can do it. It's hard. And there are bass lines where I'm just playing the same groove and I'll set a timer for 5, 10, 30 minutes and play the same exact groove. And you start to realize as you settle in, like, if you're playing maybe some eighth notes, you can play them and they sound super constipated. You're playing the notes as you see them on the page, there's no feeling to it. But once you keep playing, all of a sudden that groove sets in, and you can hit that just behind the beat kind of feel, and you can feel that change. You can feel the difference between a bassist who's just playing notes and a bassist who's learned to set into that groove. And it just takes sitting there with a metronome and playing the same damn thing for an eternity and doing it like a machine to the point where nobody notices it.
Man, well, did you see that video? I don't know what band it was or anything, but there was a band that was playing a set and the click track died for some reason. And so the drummer didn't have any idea what the timing should be, and he was using that click track to make it work. And a guy, I don't know if he was a drum tech or a guitar tech or what, gets behind the drummer, takes a drumstick, and was tapping the time on the back of his hi-hat leg so that he could keep time and keep playing. And it was just incredible to watch, because this guy who was just sitting off on the side tapping this drummer's leg saved the whole show.
That's so crazy. That just reminds me of how many people need to love your metronome, people. Learn to play with the damn metronome. Like, people are like, it ruins my creative flow or whatever bullshit. But then you have to have situations where somebody's got to tap the rhythm out for you just to play. You got to have that innate rhythm. And the only way you get that is playing often and playing in tempo, to the point where if all the instruments drop out, you're like, what the hell are you doing? I'm still in tempo. Like, get with the times, It's something you have to have.
Well, it's kind of like, I do think I kind of have some basic rhythm, not in dancing, but when it comes to music and stuff, because it was always, when I sing to my kids, I can't not sing it in the correct time. Like, if I try to sing it out of time, I will go insane. And so even if I have to talk and say something to them in the middle of singing, I will continue in. So, there's this pause, and it's like, and I say something to them, and then I continue, not from where I stopped singing, but from the place that I would have been if I hadn't talked. So that's how my brain works.
Well, at least you're doing that. One of the places where it drives me crazy, and it's a musician in me, and it was always at war when you go to church and everybody's in the spirit, but you got that person clapping on 1 and 3, and you're just like, They're feeling the spirit. Don't even think about it. But I'm like, oh, 2 and 4, 2 and 4. Why can't here? Let me help you. Oh, stop. They're just let them worship. Oh,
Yeah. Well, that if you ever okay, so on TikTok, occasionally I will run into um these TikToks, these videos of musicians doing worship music, and they kind of bum me out because like you'll hear what's in their ear when they're playing. And so there's some music directors, usually someone on the stage that's going, okay, now do the, it's like the guitar. So, okay, now we need to move to this part. And you hear all of this and the counting. And I'm like, I hate that.
yeah.
I need to find one and send it
Wow.
to you. It's so annoying. I hear it and I'm like, none of this. Like this is too structured for me.
Yeah, I can't deal with that. Oh, that reminds me of there was this guy I was going to join for the first time. I was going to be in this death metal band, and I was like, yeah, that's going to be a pinnacle. That takes some fast playing. And
Yeah.
so this guy just wanted to dictate everything. Like he was sending he's like, I wrote these songs, and he was sending me the sheet music, and he was like, oh, you need to get this kind of pedal and this kind of amp and this and this. And I'm just like, homie, It's just like, whoa, you're dictating everything I got to do. I'm going to have no creativity whatsoever. And that's I can't deal with that. I can have suggestions. I'm not rigid, but if
Yeah.
you're telling me, okay, we're moving to this part and this part, I'm like, just get out of my head. Let me feel the music.
It's so weird to see, and drives me, like I said, it drives me crazy. I don't like that idea that when everyone's trying to worship and trying to get into this mindset, and all these people on stage are hearing all of the okay, go do it big, do it big, do it big, and I'm like, I hate this. I hate
Yeah.
it so much.
The musicians on the stage are also feeling the spirit too. So if you just got somebody talking in your ear, you can't really, you're trying to draw the crowd into, worship. So if somebody's talking in your ear, you're just so busy concentrating on that it becomes generic to me. You also have to be feeling the spirit at the same time.
Moving past that for a second, because last night I read about separately from what the book I'm reading about Canaanite gods for a little bit, like El and Baal and Asherah. And I just finished reading through Exodus. I'm in Leviticus now because I'm reading through the whole thing again. But I just passed the story in Exodus where God had just laid out the plans for the covenant for the people, and they said they agreed to it. And then Moses went up to the mountain to get the plans for the tabernacle and all these different things, as well as to get the 10 Commandments on the stones and come back down. And he was up there for so long that the people started getting restless. And they went to his brother Aaron and said, Aaron, build us a god that we can worship for getting us out of Egypt. And so Aaron says, yes, give me all of your earrings, nose rings, and your gold, and I'll fashion you an idol that we can worship for getting us out of Egypt. They kept saying that, like, it is very important for you to know that they're moving the worship from Yahweh to this calf that saved them from Egypt. And so as I was reading through the different things about Canaanite gods, I came upon the fact that Baal, who might be tied to Hadad, his visage, as well as human, was a bull. And so it's even happening, like that stuff I'm talking about, the ancient cosmology and all these places. This is still having a direct effect within the story of the Exodus. And God gets real mad when they start doing this. And Moses goes up to talk to God, and God says, you'll be safe. Essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, obviously. You'll be safe. You stay up here. I'm just going to go and kill all of them and start a new nation with you. And Moses is like, no, 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 no. And what's interesting is I've heard a lot of people theologizing around the fact that Moses spoke to God, prayed to God, and God changed his mind and decided to spare the people, right? Except for those who like really started the business, they got judged very harshly. People are always like, oh, did Moses change God's mind, or is he immutable? And it's really fascinating is if you actually look at that conversation and what Moses says to God in order to change his mind, is he appeals to his consistency. He appeals to his character, and he says, "This is who you are. Do you really want to do this? I wish you wouldn't." And God's like, "No, you're right. This isn't me. I'm not going to do that." And it's just all because of this world that's around them. The Egyptians and then the Canaanites, they all have their own gods and their own cosmologies, and this whole story is going, let me set the record straight, and also here's some cool stories. I love it. Sorry. I love this stuff, man. Oh, I bought so many books. I'm going to finish this one. And then there's another one I want to read by Michael Gorman, who I'm trying to get on our show, called Shut Up, Siri. Who I'm trying to get on my show. He wrote a book called Reading Revelation Responsibly, I believe is the name of the title. So I just got that. That'll be my next book, because everyone's always like, let's talk about Revelation. Let's talk about eschatology. And I'm like, dude, I just want to know about Genesis right now. This is interesting because you don't have Revelation or even the Gospels if you don't have Genesis and the whole story that's set out from there. And so I'm like, I want to do the whole thing. Let me get the Gospel all the way through from beginning to end. But yeah, I'm going to do Revelation next. And then I guess I got to fill out the rest of the books.
Right on. Well, I mean, do what you love, man, especially in these crazy times. Do what you love, because that's going to, keep you going forward. It just keeps you, there's something in having to do all the bullshit you got to do throughout the day, but knowing you get to come home to that, but you get to come home to that study. And yeah. I have that feeling with music, even with, I nerd out with music theory. I have this awesome book called Easy Ear Training Handbook by it's like Roberta, I think it's Radke, and she's the ear training chair at Berklee School of Music. And it's just fascinating, like how they put those things together. And I'm just that person just sitting here with this book with my keyboard and my bass just over here figuring out how to do intervals between chords and, really learning the ear training to the point where I've got the simple stuff down where I can hear a song and I can actually, transpose that to a sheet of paper now. And the start with that, of course, is I'm going to bring it back to the topic the bass line. The bass line is your key to ear training, whether it's played by a piano, something that's playing that bass line itself. It's usually a bass guitar in Western music. Is your context is like, okay, this bass player is playing that sounds like it's and this is where knowing your scales comes in important. So I'm just always at home consuming this, and other people out there partying and stuff, and I'm over here like, no, just hours just sitting here with ear training. And it's just hearing somebody else have a passion like that is always good to hear from me, because the way you're talking about this is the way that I talk about ear training and all that. And I just, I just love seeing that on people's face, like the look on your face while you're talking about it. You just love it. And it's such a good thing to see. I
love it. And it's like, who am I going to have these conversations with? Because this is like such high level stuff that most people have no conception of it. And so kind of the way my brain works is I want to take these concepts and try to boil them down so that I can have this conversation and talk about this and have people understand me and understand the subject a little bit more. But yeah, no, I just love, I love where I am when it comes to learning, because I do so much more of it now than I did when I was a kid. Oh, speaking of not ear, what did you say? Ear learning?
Ear training, yeah.
Ear training. Not that, but my son, my oldest, he wants to play guitar. I got my wife a guitar a couple years ago. She gave that to him, and he keeps asking me to tune it because he gets out of tune very easily. And I've told him that I'm not going to let him use the tuner. And he's like, why? I don't have this skill. And so I'm trying to give him a skill I don't have. And so what I've been doing is I've, tuned my guitar correctly. and I have it just right on the money with my tuner. And then I say, okay, tune it. And I do the top string and I play it for him. And I'm like, match it. And so he's going through, and by the time he's like 10 years old, he'll be able to tune a guitar at any point in time without needing a tuner or anything. He'll just be able to go and move on. Because I never had that skill. And I'm like, how do I teach it to him?
Yeah. I was like, yeah, that's a good thing. And especially if you at least have one string in tune, I love the harmonics method. Is literally just, not pressing down the string. You get one. If you're like the top string, you like just barely press over the fret, not holding it down. You just pluck that harmonic, usually closer to like the bridge, and let that ring out. And then you go a fret down and then go to the 7th fret and do the same harmonic method. Yeah. And those two should sound exactly the same. And that's a really good way to really tune your guitar. But the method you're using is good, especially when they're young. Usually, I forgot what age, it's like a very young age, maybe the first year that a child is developing, is the claim is that's when perfect pitch can happen. Like later than that, all of a sudden it's just gone and all you can do is relative pitch. But that also might drive somebody crazy, because then they'll start hearing the pitch of every single thing around and just drive you up the wall.
Do you know who Charlie Puth is?
Yes. Just not very well. I've known the name though.
Yeah, I've never listened to his music. It's not my style. But he's on TikTok, and he has one of the most annoying TikToks, because like he'll be sitting somewhere and he'll see another TikTok, or he'll hear something in his house and he'll that's C sharp minor followed by it. And it's like, shut up.
Stop that. Yeah. And it's like, don't flaunt that skill.
Right. It's and there's another guy, I forget his, Benny Blanco or something, that just makes fun of him all the time. And I like his account purely because the guy who's making fun of him. I'll only see his videos because the guy who makes fun of him. So I know you wanted to talk about, do you feel like you covered Stoicism with dreams and interests? You feel like you covered that? Because I have a list of the things that we talked about, and I'm like, I want to get to everything she wanted to talk about.
Yeah, pretty much. I just use that. Well, I guess the only other point I would say is, just never be limiting to yourself. The one thing Stoics talk about is, of course, the control. And the only thing you can control is, pursuing your dreams step by step, doing little bits at a time. And so there's not a single thing that you can't do. And when somebody says that I can't do this, or somebody told me I can't even play bass because I have finger issues, I'm like, one of the guys who's teaching the Scott Devine from Scott Bass Lessons has a neurological disorder in his hand, and he'll be wearing a glove playing bass, because if he doesn't wear it, his fingers will do funky things. So I'm like, but he plays the hell out of that bass. So it's like, don't let anything limit you. I've also seen a guitar player who had one arm, and he had like this thing on his arm, and he was strumming with like whatever it was and just rocking that guitar. I'm like, no excuses, man.
Or like Def Leppard, their drummer, one arm.
Dude.
It's like you can either make the excuse, or you can make your dreams come true.
Yeah.
Do it. So the other thing that you mentioned, I think, was you wanted to talk about a specific philosopher who lived in the heyday of Stoicism, and I don't think we've touched on that.
Oh man, I don't even have all my notes on. It was just recently I've been trying to get into. It's Seneca the Younger, which is one of the I guess the late Stoa, because they're about like different. There's a middle Stoa and all that, but Seneca I found interesting because he had to be the mentor to Nero, who was like one of the worst emperors ever. And then Seneca ended up having to, I guess it's complete suicide because he was being punished, but he was not the most perfect of Stoics, but I like him because he was a playwright, and he, was a poet, that sort of thing. And he also was exiled at some point because at some point he was accused of having an affair. So, had to go through the usual. It just seemed like back then in the Greek and Roman times, man, if any of these people, these emperors just didn't like you, they'd be like, oh, he like slept with my niece's
Yeah.
sister or something. They just exile you. And so a lot of his writings in exile are like the most stoic thing I've ever seen, talking about how, I'm exiled away from everybody I care about, but I still get to see the stars. I get to
Yeah.
see this. He has some great writings. And the reason I like his writings, because he does them on different topics, like on anger, on death. And he was writing to somebody's mentoring, and his name was Lucius, and he was this young guy, and he's just had this huge book of letters that was just writing on these different topics, on friendship, all sorts of stuff. And I found him the most fascinating out of it's like usually Marcus Aurelius is the other one people talk about. And I like Marcus Aurelius. Meditations is a really good thing to read. It's not easy to digest when you're first starting out, but Seneca, I think, is a little more accessible, I think, to most people. And if you ever have a topic that you was like, I'm dealing with this, he's most likely going to have a letter on it. And I just think his life is fascinating, because a lot of people, and you see it a lot now, with every sort of public figure there is, they're like, well, who cares if this person was great? Well, they didn't follow their philosophy here. Or, like with Christians, that Christian isn't perfect because they messed up here. Well, nobody's ever going to be perfect, but, you can't take away from their whole body of work and the stuff that they leave behind just because they made one mistake. But we're in a culture these days where people can go back and see your post from like 10 years ago and then totally cancel you for that garbage. And it's like, yeah, like that person is perfect that tried to cancel you.
I wish I could cancel Cam from 12 years ago, because his Facebook posts are so cringy. They're so cringy. I'm like, why did I write this? You dork, absolute nerd. So one of the things I wanted to mention, because you mentioned Nero, one of the fascinating things that I've learned just recently, well, somewhat before, but like I heard more details recently, and it piqued my interest again, is if you read the book of Revelation, you have the number of the beast, which is 666. And it turns out they use a lot of coding with numbers to pass along messages that they didn't want someone who would throw them in jail for being Christian to know. And one of the 666 is actually their word. If you do the math that they use for this name, it means Nero. And so it's describing Nero. And then other people will come in and say, actually, it's supposed to be 616. If you look here, it's 616. And the story behind 616 was that when it was translated into Latin, the math didn't work anymore. And so they decided to put in 616 because it added up to Nero. And so we know for sure that it was talking about Nero. And one of the things that I heard, I think it was yesterday, this historian was talking about how after Nero died, he was so bad and he was such a horrible figure who persecuted people that people would actually believe that he was going to come back after his death and hurt people again.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's just so fascinating. The last, I just wanted to share that with you because it's like what, but the last thing that I wanted to ask you about is, so after that whole deal with the Washington Post, I've been tweeting and making jokes for years, decade and a half at this point. But I've never gotten paid for jokes before. And that seems like it would be really a cool thing. I tweeted, and it had nothing to do with this Washington Post thing. Just I had a really good Twitter day, and I got a notification on my phone from PayPal, and someone had sent me $15, and it said, for all the laughs you gave me on Twitter today.
Nice.
And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. Now that you're playing music and potentially being paid, I don't know how that's working, but what's it like to be paid for your art? Because I know what it feels like for me, but in this little instance, but what does it feel like for you?
It's pretty nice to me, and that's again one of the great things about being in cover bands, especially the I'm trying to get into cover bands that do weddings because they make serious money. But it's nice because I would do music for free. But the thing is, I'm going to step in, and people are going to probably not like me for this. I love my friends. Don't ask me to do your stuff for free because it's a lot of my time that I have to do this. I have to learn these songs and I have to spend time playing them, and this whole band has to play them. So don't do this whole, like, the thing I think musicians do incorrectly. They think because they're starving artists, okay, I have to play to get my name out there, to get recognition. No, people are going to use the hell out of you for a while. You make sure, of course, your product's going to be worth it. Spend time, make sure that your music is going to be good first. But at the same time, just, set up gigs, network, and all of that. And at the beginning, you're not going to make a ton, especially that's why a lot of people don't want to recruit more than one guitarist or whatever. They want a singer, a vocalist who also plays guitar, because, you have to split that money at the end of the night. And especially if you're on a bill with a bunch of other bands, you're splitting it, and you can end up with something like as small as like $26 to me, which to me is fine. I'm all like, what are you talking about, man? That's like my drinks after this performance. I'm great. I just played, and now they're paying for my drinks basically. But it is a really cool thing to know that, you're up there and you get the benefit of having money in your pocket after. And if you do certain shows, you'll have a decent amount of money, especially if you're doing it week after week, man. It's an amazing side gig. And there are people who've gotten to the point they play so often because their name is out there so often that they were able to quit their job because they're just doing nothing but playing covers.
That sounds... in a different context, because I'm not a musician. I play guitar, but not well. Perfect. I would love to be able to do the things that I love doing and to get paid for them instead of doing the silly things that I do now. I guess just some of the conversations I have, Kim, with some of these people, it's like, I can't tell you how many times I've forwarded an email to a fellow coworker and said something like, can we offer this person a class, some sort of master class in how to understand emails and how to answer questions when asked? Because they don't know how to do it. It's incredible. I thought, people, I can't even describe how freaking ridiculous it is. Like, how do I ask you a question directly and you tell me everything but what I asked you? Like, how do you do that? It's like, it's easy. Just answer the dang question.
Yeah, well, that's like working in IT. So did you reboot it? Well, I did this. No, I don't give a shit. Did you reboot the computer? And then, yes, have you seen there? I love that there's that meme that says this guy's like, I just spent 4 hours driving to push the power button on a server that 4 different people assured me was already on. It was not on. He drove that far just to hit the power button. And, it's just, people lose their minds. You ask them a direct question and they're everywhere. And you're like, that is not even close to what I asked you.
Yeah. It's like, here, let me tell you my life story. No, just tell me the thing I need to know to finish this job so I don't have to talk to you anymore. Like, that's all I need. All I need. I don't want to be stuck with you. Is there anything else you'd like to bring out or bring up in this moment? Because we're a little past an hour and a half, so
oops.
We could wrap up if you want.
Well, the one key I'm going to give, and this is also for your son as well. Musicians, especially like people who play guitar and bass. Mm-hmm. The thing that is going to unlock your skill is, number one, learn your scales. Mm-hmm. Learn your scales, because once you figure that out, you can actually learn stuff by ear easily, because there are only 12 notes in Western music. However, you can either spend forever just sliding your finger around trying to find that note, or you can learn your scales and listen to the song and be like, that is in D minor. And there are only 7 notes in that scale. So you're going to find it pretty fast. So I'd say learn your scales. Bass players, learn your chord tones, which is, of course, if you learn your scales, it will be your 1st, 3rd, 5th, and sometimes 7th note. And these are important things. So musicians out there, learn your scales. Bassists, learn your chord tones. Guitarists, learn your chord shapes. And you're going to be out there making money. That's all I got to say about that.
Hey, that sounds great. I'm going to start making money with music too. That's the goal.
Nice. Look at you.
Well, I'm just going to keep you all the way to the end because, I don't have Jessica with me right now. but she had something come up and she had to bounce, and that's fine. I'm happy she gets to take care of what she has to take care of. What a fucking weird thing to say. Who criticizes me more than me? No one. But since we're nearing the end, it's time for the question, the big one. Unless you want me to add a fun one in front of the last question. Do you want a fun one?
Yeah, we'll go with the fun one first.
Okay. Do you think that there are more doors in the world or more windows? No, sorry, I not windows. More doors or more wheels? Sorry.
Oh. I'm gonna go with wheels.
Yeah, it's hard because I want to go doors because you look at a room of safety deposit boxes. That's like a bunch of doors. Cars have 4 doors, 4 wheels, cancel each other out. There's a tire in the back. Is that a wheel? If it is considered, like, there's a good argument for wheels, but I am a door guy till I die. That's all I'm gonna say. Have you seen the game that people are playing on TikTok now?
Dude, me and TikTok we don't have a friendship. I just have people bombarding me with TikTok videos. I watch them secondhand when they're like a reel on Instagram or something.
Right. So one of the things people are doing now, I'm sure you saw this, but they'll describe a woman or man based on their ranking and attractiveness. So they'll be like, she's a 10, but, and then you finish the sentence. Yeah. So I just want to see, I want to throw one of those at you, and maybe you'll throw one at me. I don't know. Okay. So she's a 10, but she can't go to bed unless you tickle her feet every night.
Interesting.
So what is her rating now?
Feet are nasty. So now she's gonna be like a 3 because I don't want to touch anybody nasty ass feet.
See, you get the game. I can't get my wife to play it. I don't know why. So she's a 4, but she plays the bass and she loves cats, and she has a beautiful singing voice, and she's sarcastic as hell. Is she still a 4?
No. That girl is was it Spinal Tap? Turn that shit up to 11.
See, that's what I love, these little games. I love them, but I'll move past it. Let's see what David. Hey, David. Let's see what he had to say. She's a 10, but she sucks at playing bass.
Oh, dude, she's like a negative 2.
Is that? I feel like that's an unrealistic expectation, not explanation.
Yeah,
because how many people are gonna know that play bass?
that's true. I don't think I'm good at making these up because I'm like, she's a 10, but then that would mean she's a 2. And you only people who understand binary would get that. That's 1 and 0.
Oh goodness.
2 bits.
She's a 9. She has a lot of tattoos. She has a tenuous grasp on reality and at least one mental illness, and she's always down to cuddle.
Sounds like my ex. That's what that sounds like. So, I mean, I'm a little biased on that. She's no longer a 10, she's a 2.
All right. So big question time, and then blathering about what's coming up, all of that. But what right now, we've talked about a lot of the stuff that you're doing and a lot of the stuff that's giving you hope, because you're doing things you've always wanted to do. You're making money doing them in some sense. But what right now is giving you hope and is helping motivate you forward? What's something that can be easily digested by, I mean, it doesn't have to be easily digested. You could use the most complicated thing ever, but what's something you'd like to share with our audience that gives you hope and motivation?
I think it's seeing that when you don't put limits on yourself, what you can achieve. It's the most fascinating thing to be able to say, and being patient with yourself, that's important, is how much you can achieve if you're like, okay, I'm not going to just throw my base. I'm not going to stop reading this book. I'm not going to, quit this job because I couldn't learn this thing in 2 seconds. And then you're doing step by step. And then you look back over a couple months and you're like, look where I was and look where I am now. That to me, that's harnessing a power where, you just really dig into something to the point where you know it so well that you could teach it. Anything that's asked of you, you always can give somebody some pointer. And if you're the best at it, when you can actually teach it and teach it well, right, to me is how you really know something. So to me is just it motivates me that I think of things now and I go, what is it that I have to learn, or what is it I have to do? Well, I'm going to dominate the shit out of that and nothing is going to stop me. That is an amazing feeling. And that keeps me going, knowing, dude, I have no limitations. I do whatever the fuck I want to do. I do it.
Yeah. Well, it's like, speaking of in that vein, I've said this to my wife a few times. We've talked about different things and I've said, it really is true that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. Like if you can't boil it down to its parts and explain it simply, you don't understand it. And she would always fight me. And it was like maybe a week or two ago, we were having this conversation and she was trying to explain this thing to me. And I was like, oh, well, maybe you just haven't grasped it yet. And she was like, no, I just don't have the words. And I was like, okay. And she was like, yeah, I don't think I understand it yet. And I was like, what? Was that? Was it? She goes, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Damn it.
Yep.
But no, I've loved having you on and talking to you and scaring Jessica with Luca Magnotta. But yeah, for real. Thank you for coming back on and chatting with me and just talking about everything and anything that came to mind and letting me geek out about Bible stuff, because I love geeking out about Bible stuff. Like, it's my favorite thing to talk about. So thank you. I appreciate you. I'm glad that you gave me that first snowball mic so that I could start podcasting.
Hey man, it said, well, clearly look where you are now. And maybe the next one of the times I'm on here, it'll be farther down my bass journey. I'll be in some amazing original band, and you'll have a whole entire network. People are working for you and paying you a bunch of money for that, and it's going to be awesome. But thank you for having me on. Though at some point, I feel like we've got to figure out a way to have an episode that is just all us talking about true crime one of these days.
Yeah. Maybe that's what we need to plan, is be like, hey, Jessica, you have a week off. We're just Kim and I are just going to talk about our favorite murderers.
But not talking about the My Favorite Murder podcast, because screw those chicks. So
okay, murderinos. But yeah, so beyond that, dear, and hang out after I turn these creeps off who are listening. I'm just kidding. I love you. I love you, creeps. But after that's gone, I want to show you the new intro and stuff that I'm working on, and I'll pull it up so that we can watch it. But the rest of you, this is our last Wednesday show. Next week, we're going to be starting on Thursday, same time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. Our good friend Monica Perez will be joining us again, and we'll be diving deep in something, but I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. That's no fun. You get to find out when you get there. Right after that, we're going to be talking to a guy that came highly recommended that I met on Facebook, named Nick Quint, who is really spending time making a theological case for why women should be allowed to be ordained in the church. This is one of those topics that's extremely contentious. It gets very loud. I am somewhat undecided on this point, because I live in this area between, yes, I want women to be able to be ordained, but also it's like if you look at history and women being ordained, it's like some bad stuff has happened. So I'm like, I need him to explain it to me. I want to hear more about it. So we're going to just listen to his points, ask him questions, and we're not going to argue whatsoever. And if you argue in my chat, I swear to God, I'll slap you. Just listen, and then we can argue about it later. After that, I'm going to find someone else who has the opposite idea and let him talk through his points. You can, at that point, take the information from your brain, from both perspectives, and figure it out. And what's it called? Synthesize it. But I'm not going to have people debate for you. I'm not a freaking nerd. After that, my good friend from college, Josh Hires, who I have alluded to a lot in this show as someone who I really looked up to, as someone who, as a Christian, displayed the characteristics of Jesus and this fruit of the Spirit better than anyone I've ever met. And so he's gonna be coming on the show right after Nick. I'm going to be speaking. I'm excited to talk to him because we have so much to catch up on. And then right after that, David Granovsky is coming back on, and we're going to talk a little bit more about mimetic theory and stuff like that. And okay, so Dave wants you to know that you love him. No, that he loves you.
I mean, I do love him, but you kick rocks, old man.
Also, Quest, Stephen Ignoramus will be coming back on the show in mid-September to talk all about his situation with being at the Capitol on January 6th, how he was sentenced after being there, and all of the inside scoop from that. We're going to talk all about his story, but that's going to be in September. So I'm working on filling out September now. If you have any people you want to hear from, any topics you want to hear about, let me know so I can try to get that sorted out, because after September, that's when we'll do it. Kim, that's when we'll do a murder episode. We'll do it in October. We'll do in the spooky season. I've got to start moving my head around for spooky season soon. So let's do that. Last year I talked to Jack Luna. I could probably get him to come back on if you wanted to do you, me, and him in a show.
Oh, that sounds perfect. I love Jack.
So I'll see about that. We can maybe do that. Beyond that, I'm done. If you want to join us on Patreon, you should. It helps us out. Like, subscribe, comment. That way this video gets boosted up. Tell people to watch it. Send links. Get us in people's ear. The more they watch the show on this channel, the more hours, watch hours we get, which means we can monetize and really have great conversations and use super chats to really bring up comments that I can't always get to otherwise. Beyond that, t-shirts and mugs at wearethemetalOnes.com/store. I should have a brand new shirt out by next week with the new setup for the logo. And I have a feminine design that a very pretty woman who had all 5 of my children drew out for me. So we should have 2 new shirts there by next week. I'm on Twitter at HamCarlos. This lovely woman here is on Twitter at The Lone Token. Like on the South Park episode, or if you want to follow and check out what she did when she was doing the show called Lesbertarian, she's at Lesbertarian. Is there anything else you want to share about where to find you, or is that kind of good?
The only thing there's a change to my Instagram is just Kim Schjang Base, all one word now. That's more of my base account, but I'm still going to leave all my offensive political stuff up, even though it's going to be mostly based stuff, because I want people to go back and go, oh my God, I'm horrified at what you believe. And I'm like, good, maybe you need to think about it.
Awesome. And even though Jessica is not here right now, if you want to follow her, you can follow her as always at SoupCanarchist. If you're listening, you can watch this on Rockfin, you can watch this on Odyssey, and you can watch it on YouTube. YouTube is generally best because that's how we can do comments. If you're watching and you'd rather listen, and if you'd rather not see my face, we're on all podcatchers. You can go to wearethemetalOnes.com and listen to everything there. I think that is all the things I need to say at the end of the episode. So, again, thank you so much, Kim. You're the best. And with that, you have a chance to be a light in the world, so go light it up.